The Wings Over New Zealand show is brought to you in association with the Wings Over New Zealand Aviation Forum, New Zealand's #1 aviation discussion forum online. There you'll find discussion on all aspects of New Zealand aviation, from history to current affairs, and thousands of photos covering the Royal New Zealand Air Force, airlines, general aviation, warbird restorations, airshow news, sport aviation, home building, gliding, aviation media, and much, much more. You'll be in good company with other aviation enthusiasts, including pilots, engineers, warbird owners and restorers, historians and authors, modelers, aviation photographers, and many others. Sign up to the Wings Over New Zealand community now. It's free and easy. Just Google Wings Over New Zealand and you'll find the forum.
Welcome to the Wings Over New Zealand show with Dave Homewood.
We've now got Don Simms, who's going to give us a talk on the Skyhawks.
So yeah, Skyhawks, my favourite subject. No booing. You've been warned. So I've got two Skyhawk presentations, but I'll do the one on the RNZAF Skyhawk service. The other one is just about the history of the Skyhawk and how it was developed and used around the world, but we'll focus on this one for now. Happy to do the other one another time. So yeah, a wee bit about me if you don't know me. Spent 17 odd years in the Air Force as an Avionics Technician. Worked mostly on the Skyhawks at a Hakia, but also a little bit on air trainers and Mackies and Sue and Iroquois at Hobsonville for a while as well. Kahu, the author of the book Skyhawks, or Dave might want to hold it up there if you haven't seen it, which was published in 2011 with Nick Frampton. So a lot of the photos, if you've got the book, you might recognise in his presentation. I'm a volunteer guide at the museum here on Saturdays and live and work in Christchurch. So this is probably a timeline of what we're going to cover today. The presentation takes about an hour, so I'll try and go as fast as I can so we'll be behind. If you've got any questions, just sing out. It's a good opportunity to ask. So yeah, in the 1960s, the RNZAF was going through quite a modernisation with Ian Morrison, and there's a picture up there, seeing we're in the Morrison room. He was the man behind the RNZAF purchasing Hercules, Orion, Iroquois, Sioux, and one other project he had was the Canberra Replacement, but he never quite got it over the line before he left office and retired. So in the 1960s, we sort of visualised what jets were like around the world. They were mostly supersonic. Australia had just ordered the Mirage 3 for their fighter jet. Vietnam was just kicking off. The POMs had Lightnings, and they were just introducing the TSR-2, or going to. The F-111 was sort of in development, so that was the era. And the RNZAF operated Canberras. Excuse me, I might grab that water actually. Canberras and Vampires. The Vampires being pretty short range, sort of day fighter, no real sophisticated avionics in them, no radar. The Canberras themselves were actually reasonably new. This model of the Canberra, the BI-12, we'd only got them sort of late 1950s, 58, 59. So by the mid-60s they weren't actually very old, but technology-wise they were obsolete. We'd operated Canberras in Singapore during the Malay emergency in confrontation with Indonesia, but they were just leased off the RAF. So yeah, 1960s our Canberras were pretty much obsolete.
Did they have satin and silk at that stage?
Sorry, were they?
Did they have satin and silk in the avionics at that stage?
Don't know, sorry. Before my time. The one advantage that Canberra had was it had two engines, two crew, and was very deployable. You could take a Canberra anywhere in the world just with the two crew, self-start, as long as you had cartridges, and very deployable. And redundancy with two engines. So yeah, nice little shot there from 66 with the brand new P3 and the RNZAF Strike wing flying alongside. There was various contenders out there for the Canberra Replacement. F-111s were talked about initially. Ian Morrison was really keen on the F-111, but he realised that we'd never be able to afford them, and it was such a new technology still, the swing wing, and as it turned out it was a bit of a disaster there initially. Australia was just introducing the Mirage 3, and they were really keen for the RNZAF to buy some of those Mirages because they were being assembled and built in Australia, so economically for them it would have made sense. Obviously Vulcans were flying around, but we already had one in service, if you didn't know. The F4 and F5 were quite high on the list of contenders, as was the Starfighter. But the Phantom was pretty much the Air Force's first choice. It was twin engine, 2 crew, exactly what we're used to with the Canberra, and yeah, pretty high performance, high tech aeroplane. And then that's a good model of what they might have looked like in RNZAF service had we got them. But the reality was the budget that the Air Force were given to work with was only enough to buy probably 8 Phantoms, and everyone realised that was never going to work because you probably have 4 serviceable out of the 8, and that was just not going to be worth the effort. It wasn't helped by the New Zealand dollar devaluing continuously through the 1960s, and then decimal currency came in and it devalued even more, so the money they had in US dollars to work with was just getting smaller and smaller. One other type that was looked at was the Corsair, which was actually a design that was developed to replace the Skyhawk in US Navy service. And interestingly, there's no Corsairs flying in the world anymore, and that was the aeroplane that was designed to replace the A4, but there's still a lot of Skyhawks. The F5 was about the only aeroplane that was within our budget that we could get a decent number. However, it was pretty limited with its range and payload. It was twin engine, so it had that extra safety factor. But in terms of where we were in the world and deploying the aeroplane, it was always going to be a problem because it didn't have the range to fly to Australia even. So then along came the Skyhawk. I've heard the story about the Douglas man and his projector coming to Wellington, and he put up his projector and showed the film of basically A4s dropping bombs in Vietnam and coming back with big holes in them, and in his little sales pitch did the trick, because next thing we were getting Skyhawks. This is an interesting photo. I unfortunately didn't have that photo available when we did the book because I would have put it in it, and it shows Keith Holyoake sitting in an A4 with a nuclear powered aircraft carrier cruising through Cook Strait. Wouldn't see that anymore, would you? So yeah, 1968, government approval was given to purchase 14 Skyhawks. And there were some sort of early Douglas art drawings of what they would look like. The one here was a very early one. Obviously it's just probably taken the Royal Australian Navy drawing and changed the roundels, I'd say. So in 1968, yeah, we signed up to purchase 14 A4, well, 10 single-seaters and 4 two-seaters. And as part of that, Squadron Ross Donaldson, who was a 75 Squadron Vampire Canberra pilot, went on an exchange posting to VA44 in the US to learn to fly them and to become an instructor, and he was going to train all the New Zealand pilots. And that was him there, just talking to the then CAS, the RNZAF, who was going for a backseat ride. But unfortunately in late 69, Ross Donaldson had a bird strike on a Skyhawk. He was in the back seat, a student in the front, and the bird penetrated the canopy and went into his face and head. He lost one eye and nearly lost the other. He was very badly injured, and he had to eject from the aircraft. So that was the end of his A4 flying. So in 1969-70, there was training done for air crew and ground crew. That was the 10 pilots that went over to the US to fly with VA44 in Florida at Cecil Field. Some quite famous individuals amongst them, if you recognise them. Trevor Bland there, Ross Ewing. And yeah, standing behind our aircraft, as the aircraft came off the production line, they were flown from Long Beach in California to Florida, and effectively the squadron was formed off our own aircraft. And that's 01, just at the Douglas factory, getting its sort of final checks before its first test flight in December 1969. And you've probably seen a few of these photos in the book. Interesting one, that one. It's an Israeli A4H, which was also coming off the production line at the same time. Notice it's got no markings on it, and that was just because of the sensitivity of the Israeli aircraft being sold brand new to the Israelis. So,
It's not the hump either.
no, the A4H initial models didn't. It was like the A4G, the Australian one, didn't have it either. But it also had the drag chute and a squared off fin tip, same as ours, but it just didn't have the hump in avionics. Ours didn't have the avionics either, it had an empty hump.
Good for the reason.
51, and those that have been following A4's 51 crashed at Nellis Air Force Base a couple of months ago with Draken. That was the cockpit as delivered. Some of the kit in there was, even though it was new technology for New Zealand, it was actually pretty old technology for the A4 and for jets. The radar was a very, very basic air-to-ground radar. Wasn't actually much use for anything. It was just ballast flying around an aeroplane. It could find ships at sea. That was about all it was good for. It was no good. It couldn't find aircraft air-to-air, no air-to-air mode. And it was a totally manual thing that the pilot had to constantly be heads down, which was never a good thing in a fighter jet when you're flying along low and fast. The gun sight was a very rudimentary gun sight. It was actually less sophisticated than the Vampire's gun sight. At least it had a gyro stabilised gun sight. This was literally just a Chinograph pencil mark on the windscreen, as one pilot described it. The all attitude indicator was a pretty big instrument in the instrument panel, and it was actually one item of avionics that was quite useful. It was a really good attitude indicator. You could do aerobatics off it, it wouldn't topple, and it was developed from the Apollo space program. So if you ever see Apollo 13, the movie, there's a big abba jabba indicator on the instrument panel, same as that. Some of the other kit in the aircraft, there was chaff flare dispenser controller there, and these warning lights along here were associated with the ECM system on the aircraft, the Spot SAM and AAA. That was all Vietnam era stuff that was just standard coming off the production line. While we had all that in the cockpit, we didn't have any of the boxes and the hump that made it all work. That was the humps, they were empty. The wiring and racks was all there, but the boxes weren't sold to us and we weren't allowed them. So eventually all this kit was removed. And I remember when I first went to 2 Squadron in 1987, there was a covered box under the bench in the avionics bay full of all this kit. And I think now I wouldn't mind a bit of that, but it was all just thrown out, no doubt. Otherwise, it's a pretty standard analogue aeroplane. There was no digital avionics on it at all. The navigation computer down here was a purely electromechanical device, worked off Doppler, so it didn't even have an inertial system in it. You could only have 2 waypoints in it, where you were now and where you were going. So. And wasn't particularly accurate because of Doppler, so the airplane needed to be flying straight and level to get a good Doppler return, and if you lost that Doppler return because you were manoeuvring, it would go into a backup mode using just airspeed and air data, but it was pretty inaccurate. When they'd fly from New Zealand to Australia, it wasn't unusual to be 30, 40 miles off track using the navigation system. This airplane's been handed over at the Douglas factory in January 1970, and then they said they were flown across to Florida where the pilots and ground crew were doing their training. That's Trevor Bland there. Nice shiny new aeroplanes. They certainly never looked that clean when we worked on them over there. The colour scheme was a bit unusual for a naval aircraft. You can see down the line there the Navy ones are all grey and white, pretty standard. We adopted the US Air Force Southeast Asian camouflage scheme, which was that brown and two-tone green with a whitey underside. And we sort of spoiled the camouflage by putting white antennas and red, big white drop tanks on it.
Are they straight probes?
Yep, initially they had straight probes, and then they were modified in 74 to bent ones, just to prevent fuel going down the intakes when they were refueling. That was a US Navy mod. So we had the airplanes sitting in Florida, and then they decided how to get them to New Zealand. The pilots were all pretty keen to fly them. They were pretty confident they could fly them with the anywhere refueling, but the senior Air Force leadership wasn't keen on that, so they arranged for a US helicopter carrier to bring them to New Zealand. So they were wrapped up in their cocoon latex suits and put on the deck of the USS Okinawa and sailed from San Diego via Hawaii to Auckland. And those lucky individuals that were over there managed to get a ride on the ship and experience Navy life for a couple of weeks. They had a pretty good time by all accounts, apart from when they hit this big storm just out of Auckland. It was a really severe storm, and the captain of the ship was really worried that he was going to have to cut the chains and let the aircraft go, because the ship was top heavy with them sitting on deck. But fortunately that didn't happen, and they eventually arrived in Auckland. Sort of ironic that they started their life in the RNZAF and latex and ended it as well, as we'll see. Yeah, it was a pretty mean storm. That helicopter was also strapped down at the front, and later on the storm and the waves actually bent the blades and buggered. They were all folded like that deliberately, but later on the waves were actually smashing right over the top of that and bent the helicopter blades, but fortunately there was no damage to the A4s. So they arrived in Auckland and were unloaded, and Helen Clark is in there somewhere. Haven't got a photo to prove it, but I'm confident she is in there, and Phil Goff as well. And then they were towed through the streets of Auckland and then down the northwestern motorway to Whenuapai. So yeah, it must have been quite a spectacle.
Both lanes of the northwestern motorway.
Yeah.
All two lanes of it. Yeah.
I love this shot here because you get an idea of the era of the motor vehicles. Late 60s, 70s motor vehicles. And
they're all British, aren't they?
Yeah, they're probably all British. Yeah. And here we were with these brand new high-tech jets, and we're still at them 30 years later. And then unwrapping them like Christmas presents in Whenuapai in the hangar. And you can see that the latex coating is just literally like a cardboardy paper that was just ripped off. So it's hardly surprising that 30 years later when they sprayed it on that it didn't last too well out in the weather. And then that's on arrival at Ahakia, some of the first aircraft. This device here is the Huffer GTC air start cart. Initially they came like that so they could be mounted underslung under the aircraft centre line and actually flown with it on. Obviously they take the wheels and handlebar off it, but it was all designed to be flown under the airplane to give the aircraft a self-start capability. But we never used it like that, and quickly we took the jet engine out of that and made our own GTCs, which were much easier to move around the flight line. So quite historic photos there of the line of A4s with the Canberras behind. And again, the airplane's all beautiful and shiny and new, no hydraulic and oil leaks. And they even got the groundies in their white VIP overalls seeing them in. That's a great shot to show the size difference between the three types. And then from that you can see the A4 really is a small airplane compared to even the Vampire in plan view. And also shows the effectiveness or otherwise of the camouflage, and these great big white drop tanks sort of ruined it. But you'll see we eventually fixed that. And you spot the A4 just there, you can see the shadow. That's Palmerston North Clock Tower. Everyone wanted their photos taken with the A4s obviously because they were brand new. So this colour photo was only recently found in the archives here. Prior to that I'd only ever seen it in black and white. And Matthew recently found it in colour as well. So there's some historic vehicles amongst that fleet.
What is that? That's the part.
That's just the MT motor transport section of the Ahakia, yeah.
The tankers.
Tankers and cranes and tugs. Probably the Christmas photo. And that was 75 Squadron in December 1970. The original weapon capability that came with the aircraft was just pretty standard for the A4. No real smart weapons, it was just all dumb bombs and rockets. 20mm cannon and Zuni rockets of 5" and 2.5". And various size bombs from 250 pounds up to 2,000 pounds. So those ones there are 250 pounders, I think there'll be 500 pounders, 1,000 pounders and 2,000 pounders as well. And you can see that's actually a later photo with the bent probe. We got Sidewinder air-to-air missiles in 1974 as well to add to that, just to give the aircraft a self-defence capability. And that's quite a good shot of she was all bombed up. I don't think we would have ever dropped that many bombs at once, because that would have blown your whole year's bomb budget. But the Skyhawk was a bomb truck. That's what it was designed for, was to drop bombs and fire rockets, close air support. It was never easily a fighter, but it turned out to be a very good dogfighter just because of its small size and manoeuvrability.
It's got machine guns, isn't it?
Yeah, the 20mm cannon and the wing roots. Yeah, but they weren't very good. They would jam very quickly when you fired them. They often jammed, and that was something, no matter what we did, we could never solve. 1970, of course, the Vietnam War was on. We'd sent our Vampire and Canberra pilots to Vietnam to fly with the US Air Force as forward air controllers. A number of them, like Ross Ewing, John Scrimshaw, and many of them flew with a 6-month tour in Vietnam as forward air controllers. But unbeknown to most people, we also sent ground crew. And these were 75 Squadron guys. We sent 2 groups. This was the second group, and they operated with VMA 311 at Chu Lai, which was a Marine squadron. The first overseas deployment was in 1971, and that was to Williamtown, which is north of Sydney. And while they were there, they flew down to Nowra, which is where the Australian Navy had their Skyhawks based. And Nowra would be where we would eventually operate a squadron of A4s in the 1990s, and on that same flight line. The first major overseas deployment was in 71 also, which was Exercise Vanguard, which went to Singapore. And they took 8 single-seat A4s on that, which was the first real big trip. Throughout the 70s, Ahakia was a pretty exciting place to be, with lots of overseas visitors. The Brits would come with aircraft carriers and all sorts of exotic airplanes like Sea Vixens and Buccaneers, as well as their regular Vulcan visits. And of course the Yanks would come a lot with all their aircraft as well. There's just some more shots of various firepad demonstrations. There's been a bit of talk on various forums and Facebook of late of a place called Camp Sanson at Ahakia, and this was Camp Sanson, which is away, the base is away over here, and it's as far away as you can get from Ahakia, the base, so you can load up live weapons and bombs, so if anything goes boom, it's not going to blow up the base. It was closer to Sanson than it was Ahakia, which is the nearest town. But yeah, desolate place, nothing out there, no facilities. It was a great place.
Is that where Siberia was, the camp?
No, Siberia was further down where the Air Force Museum used to be,
Right.
where 3 Squadron's new buildings are now. That was where Siberia was, the workers' camp. Yeah. The Australian Navy visited pretty regularly too with their A4 Gs. They either off their carrier, or they actually did deploy across the Tasman a couple of times as well for exercises. The Australian A4G was almost identical to our A4K, it just didn't have a hump. All in other respects it was exactly the same engine. The fin was rounded off, but that was just because of the antenna that was up top, the IFF antenna. They didn't have a drag chute either. Getting overseas, particularly to Southeast Asia, required quite a massive effort. The Skyhawk couldn't go anywhere without a lot of ground crew and support equipment. So to deploy 8 Skyhawks, you needed 3 Hercules full of groundies and equipment to support that, plus a mobile TACAN unit, which would go by, these days it would have been another Herc, but in later years it was the Andovers would do that job. And they would fly ahead, set up the mobile TACAN so that the A-Force could navigate using TACAN because the nav computer wasn't too good. Around Australia and in New Zealand we had TACAN stations, but as soon as you got up into Southeast Asia there weren't any. This shot here, you can see that's an ammunition can for the 20mm gun, which lived up in here in the forward hellhole. They've had to take it out because they're obviously working on something up in there. Any guesses what it would be, Blair?
Starter, maybe?
Yeah, it could be any hydraulic, anything up in there. But yeah, they'd be full of beer cans. And after 3 hours at 30,000 feet, it was always nice and cold. The hump was also good for carrying things like that in it because it was empty. That was the traditional route to get up to Singapore or Malaysia. 3.5 hour leg across the Tasman to Richmond or Nowra, and then another 3 hour hop to Townsville, Darwin, Bali, and then Singapore. If you had air-to-air refuelling, obviously you could cut out some of those legs, but because we didn't have our own tanker, the A4 could be used as a buddy tanker, but you couldn't transfer a lot of fuel out of it. So in the early years we never air-to-air refueled. It was only later years, once the Aussies got their 707 tankers, that we did sort of, you'd skip the Townsville leg and you fly straight from Nowra up to Darwin, and then from Darwin straight up to Singapore. That would take 3 days doing it that way. And you know, if one aircraft broke down somewhere along the way, you'd generally have to hang around and wait. Everyone would wait until it was fixed. You'd have 3 Hercules, or in later years a 727 and 2 Hercules. And the first one would leave a Hakia with all the groundies and support equipment, fly to your first leg. The A4s would leave, and then everyone would jump on the next Herc and the Boeing and head off, and that would jump up to Townsville. So they'd be ready to sea in the A4s when they departed from here, and you just kept leapfrogging like that. It worked really well, and of course you're also relying on the Hercs not breaking down, which they always did, particularly in places, nice places like Darwin. They always seem to like breaking down in Darwin. In Townsville, they haven't changed, do they? 757 seem to like breaking down there.
You didn't use the Hercs for air-to-air refueling?
No, we didn't have the pods on them. Just to give an idea of the amount of kit we had to take in the pack-ups. Initially it was all just loose items like this, but in later years we got a bit smarter and built up a palletised container or bin, and everything was designed for whatever test equipment or spare parts, and that made a huge difference to the amount of room, because Hercs could carry a lot of stuff, and usually you bulk a Herc out with stuff before you weight it out, so you end up filling it up before you've actually filled it weight-wise, payload. We'd always take a spare engine, so that's the engine trolley coming on, and you'd pack as much in and around that as well. In later years we also modified it so you had 2 spare drop tanks mounted on top of it. The deployments, some of them were pretty rudimentary. This one's in Fiji in the 70s, tented camp right beside the flight line. I haven't got a shot, but there's some great shots up in Malaysia of the guys having a shower with a fire hose and a fire truck hosing them down. That was the showering facilities. So right through the 70s, deployed up to Asia at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, for a 6 or 8 week deployment. At that stage, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia didn't really have modern frontline fighter aircraft. They were just starting to get them. The F5 was probably their latest acquisition there. That's in Malaysia. Interestingly, Singapore, Malaysia and Indonesia all ended up getting Skyhawks pretty much because they liked ours so much. The only time the Skyhawks fired their guns in anger, the Kinnan incident in 1976. That's the Kinnan there. You can see it was only a very small squid fishing boat. It was caught fishing within the 12-mile limit up off Taranaki. The Navy patrol boat chased it. It refused to stop for it, including when they fired their twin 50 cal machine guns across the bow. It still wouldn't stop. So they called in the Skyhawks, and it was the last day of the financial year at Hakia, and just happened that they were doing weapons program to spend the last of the weapons budget for the financial year, and they had a big piss-up organised for the end of the day to celebrate the end of the financial year. So they quickly loaded up some Zuni rockets and 20mm, which they already had for the weapons program, and sent out a few A4s. Jim Jennings was the lucky one who got to fire his shots across the bow, and it only took one burst, 53 rounds across in the water in front, and the boat stopped and allowed the Navy to board it. So 06 is the Skyhawk, which is now in Motet up in Auckland. That's the 20mm cannon there. The butts at Ahaki are just testing it. Very noisy gun. You hear them testing them from all over base, just really loud, boom, 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 boom. Quite impressive. Came with various types of rounds, from armour piercing, tracer, high explosive. The blue one was just a target practice, so it didn't actually explode when it hit anything. But like I said, yeah, pretty unreliable gun. It was always jamming. It was a pneumatic operated gun, so it needed nitrogen to operate it. Yeah, like I said, the US came to Ahaki a lot through the 70s and early 80s with their F4s and F-111s and various other things, as did the Australians and their Mirages and F-111s. But we also went on a number of American ANZUS exercises, including to Hawaii for RIMPAC. And you see there a nice flight line of A4s from Australia, US and New Zealand. Guys flying along the beach in Hawaii and flying with some pretty interesting airplanes. The Australian Kangaroo series of exercises were another quite important exercise back in the ANZUS days, and yeah, some great shots of our A4s exercising with B-52s and stuff. Yeah, 1981, 75 Squadron formed an aerobatic team. Anyone know what that stood for?
Gold, nothing special, but quite good aerobatic team.
Yeah. Did you hear that? Red and gold, nothing special, but quite good aerobatic team. Typical Kiwi understatement. Cope Thunder was another US exercise up in the Philippines that we were invited to. I think the first time we went was 81. And that was, yeah, probably the highest level that we ever exercised with the US. They had everything you could imagine there. And by then our A4s were getting pretty old and obsolete, certainly in the avionics department. But yeah, we still acquitted ourselves very well. Technology was moving on, and the Falklands War was in 1982. In 1983, the Royal Navy came out here with HMS Invincible and some Sea Harriers. They'd just beaten the Argies and shot down a number of their Skyhawks. When the Invincible was sailing towards New Zealand, it was quite traditional for the Skyhawks to go out and welcome them. And of course they'd do it properly, then sneak up on them and attack them. And the Invincible was quite embarrassed because they never detected the incoming raid and never launched an aircraft in time to beat them. So the Harriers operated out of Hakia for a week or so, and in air combat with our A4s, they found our A4s were a little bit different to the Argentinian ones. Certainly in the pilot capability, even if they had far better technology than the Harrier. So yeah, the 1980s was a time of what do we do with the A4s? They're getting old, the avionics in them is unsupportable. The airframes and engines were still good for a fair while yet. The Air Force's first choice would have been to get some F-16s, but obviously that was expensive. There was various other types around. The F-20 Tiger Shark was trying to be sold by Northrop. That's what it might have looked like in RNZAF service. Again, A7 Corsairs, there was second-hand Corsairs on the market, very cheap, and we were offered a whole squadron of those for virtually nothing, but again, they were an airplane that was coming to the end of their service life, so it was probably a good thing we didn't. But just with perfect timing, the Australian Navy had their carrier scrapped in 1982, and then the government said that's the end of the fixed-wing fleet, and put their A4Gs up for sale. At that stage, they only had 10 left, 8 single-seaters and 2 two-seaters. They had lost 10 in accidents in the preceding 12 years. So in 1984, we signed up to buy the aircraft and all of the spares and support equipment. The cost, I think, was about 29 million Australian dollars for the 10 aircraft, and the spares we got with them was just unbelievable. The Aussies had so many spares, we had nothing compared to what they had. So the spares we got with that deal was worth more than the aircraft themselves, so it was amazing. And then that was the day they left Nara to cross the Tasman. Pretty sad day for the Navy because those guys, most of them were made redundant pretty much the next day. And then that was them arriving at Ahakia. Interesting fact about the Aussie aircraft, half of their fleet had been bought second-hand from the US Navy, and they were ex-Vietnam veterans. And I researched each airframe when I was in the Air Force and got their full history on which units had been on and how many combat sorties they'd done. So yeah, they were all genuine warbirds. When they arrived, they were put through a G to K conversion to make them the same or near as to the RNZAF aircraft. That didn't include putting a hump on them, but we modified them, put the drag chute on them, squared off fin tip, and various other avionics upgrades just to make them compatible. They still flew around with their Navy camo for quite a while. In the meantime, we went on another Cape Thunder. And you can see some of the cool hardware that was on the flight line there. 1984, F-16s, F-15s were doing pretty, like F-35s and F-22s now if you went to an exercise. You might remember there was an election in 1984 and the Labor government came in and the anti-nuclear legislation, and as a result of that, that was the end of ANZUS. So the last ANZUS exercise that was held was Triad 84 in New Zealand, which was the largest air defence exercise that had ever been held in New Zealand. The Aussies sent over Mirages, the Yanks sent F-16s, F-15s, well, the Aussies sent F-111s as well. The Yanks also sent AWACS and KC-135 tankers. So pretty amazing exercise. It was the year I joined the Air Force, 1984, so I got to watch from the school here as all the jets flew around. And that was the last time we got to play with the Americans up until very recently. Some shots of Triad. Also in 1984, because we now had another 10 Skyhawks, they decided to form another Skyhawk squadron, which was number 2 squadron, and they were to be the conversion training squadron to train the pilots to fly them, and that would allow 75s for them just to be operational. And you can see the multi-colour scheme flight line there of the different colours of the jets over there, including one that was just in bare metal. Colourful T-birds, 2 different Aussie colour schemes, our original colour scheme, and then that was the Euro 1 camo scheme that we went to with all the aircraft. Very effective camo scheme, that one. And it was a wraparound, so it was the same underneath. This aeroplane was painted up in US markings for the Walt Disney movie The Rescue. That was where the Bristol freighter, they escaped in a Bristol freighter and Skyhawks came and saved the day or something. And they wanted US markings on the aircraft. They wanted live sidewinders fitted to the aircraft, which various people weren't too happy about, but they insisted they'd be live ones because they reckoned all the aircraft spotters would know live ones from dummy ones. Never mind the fact that they were Skyhawks and the US Air Force never flew them like that. But and just again the 3 different colour schemes and how effective that is. If you just sort of generally look at the screen, that just blends in. It's probably just the white of the bomb rack it gives it away. It was a really effective camo scheme, that one. Yeah, just through the 80s, just some of the stuff we did with them. Yeah, Concorde could easily accelerate away from it, but it was a good photo op. 1987 for the Air Force's 50th anniversary, they painted the Skyhawk in the gold colour schemes, and the humour of the groundies is always pretty good, so they had a bit of paint left over, so they painted someone's car as well. But that was actually down at Woodburn. The guys were on a course. It was an S&S course, and somebody got the leftover paint and painted her up. 87 was the first time the Aussies came to New Zealand with their F-18s. So it was the first time we got to play with them, and pretty quickly realised that these things were pretty sophisticated with their flash radar and weapon system. Compared to our old Skyhawk, we had none of it. And that was just some of the formations from the Air Force's 50th anniversary. The Brits sent over a couple of tankers, TriStar and a VC-10. You notice that the A-4 was actually refuelling the VC-10 there. Sucked it dry pretty quick, I imagine. It was just for the photo, but you think about the jet blast and it must have been getting a fair bit of buffet down the back here. Not designed for refueling, something like that. Some big formations were flown in 1987 as part of the anniversary, including a 18-ship Skyhawk formation and a 30-ship jet formation, which had all the jets that were at Haki at the time: Strike Masters, Skyhawks, Mirages and F-18s. So that shot there is part of that. It's not all of them.
So that 18, well, that's all of the Skyhawks.
That was all the serviceable Skyhawks at Haki at that time. We had 24 Skyhawks at that time. Yeah. So there would have been probably 6 in servicings at Woodburn and Haki. That included one that was in bare metal, was way down there, and the gold one as well. Kiwi Red Aerobatic Team was formed, sort of first time was 1986, but every year after that they sort of reformed it for various events, including the RNZAF 50th anniversary. We were allowed to fire off all our time expired AIM-9G Sidewinders because the explosives in them had all reached its end of life and couldn't be relifed, so they were all launched and fired off. And then in 1985 Project Kahu began, which was the avionics upgrade to the aircraft, and it's just a before and after look at the cockpit, the technology. So for early 19 or mid 1980s, that was cutting edge. It really was state of the art, and that was when I got involved on the Skyhawks again was 87, and then went to 2 Squadron in 1989 for the end of the test flying program. Quite a big job. The aircraft were completely rewired, so they ripped all the wiring out and all new looms were made up. A lot of it was digital, so a lot of the communications between boxes was by a digital data bus rather than individual wiring, so that saved a lot of weight. The head-up display was from Ferranti in Scotland. At the time it was the most advanced head-up display that they'd built. And I've talked to one of the Draken pilots at the 75 Squadron reunion the other day, and he's an F-16 pilot and been flying the latest F-16s, and he reckons it is still better than the F-16 HUD, just the way the symbology is presented and what it can do. So that's pretty good to hear. But you can see what a tight fit the HUD was. To get it to fit into this little space, it was a real nightmare. And to also allow the pilot's legs to clear it when they in an ejection, they actually had to chamfer off either side here just to give a few more millimetres clearance for the pilot's legs to come through. Because you can see from those shots there, your feet go down there to the rudder pedal, so your knees are actually sitting in here. So if you eject, it's got to go up through that gap, and it was very tight.
With the Ferranti, did they design that for another aircraft and you just adapted it for the Skyhawk?
No, it was made just for us, and they subsequently sold a lot of those to a lot of other air forces that were upgrading their aircraft, including Canada with the F5s, Singapore's A4s got the same HUD on them, Taiwan's F5s, yeah, so we developed it and subsequently others adapted it.
The first guy that punched down the Kahu with the HUD, and it was quite proud of the fact he's kept
Yeah, it was always going to be, well, this will be interesting. Yeah, and he was they were big guys too, the ones that injected, so yeah, it all worked. They did pull trials with the seats, with a crane. They all had to get in their full kit, get in, strap in, put their feet on the rudder pedals, and then they pulled the seat out just to see if they were all cleared. And there were a couple of pilots that didn't, they had to stop flying. The head-up display had a TV camera up here, and it recorded through the HUD. And again, it was, for its day, it was cutting-edge technology in terms of miniaturisation of cameras and stuff. That's just a diagram of the avionics system and the data bus system that it all talked on. And in its day, it was just cutting edge compared to what we had. Yeah, you're right. All of the wiring looms were made by Pacific Aerospace up in Hamilton, and just making the wiring looms was a massive job in itself, because they all have to be made to fit exactly through the bulkhead holes and round corners, and so to do it they put it on these pin boards and map it all out and have to make it up and then trial fit it and make adjustments. A really big job in terms of its design, but that was all done in Hamilton and they did a great job. Pacific Aerospace also built a lot of the reload boxes and panels in the aircraft, and Fisher and Paykel also printed off most of the circuit boards and componentry and made them up. So there was quite a lot of work done in New Zealand, and the quality of all that stuff was really good. That's the instrument panel, that's the back of it, you can see, but that was all manufactured at Woodburn and designed by Air Force engineers at Woodburn. The radar was out of the F-16, so ABG 66, so it was again cutting edge radar. The radar warning system, which was new to us, and then hands-on throttle and stick, so the pilot can operate the aircraft just without taking hands off throttle and stick, without looking into the cockpit. So it really did improve the capability of the aircraft. Instead of carrying around all that ballast and radar and avionics that we had pre-Kahu, it actually did something now and worked. That was just a screenshot of the radar symbology. I won't bore you with the details. But that's a shot that Draken actually took for their publicity stuff. I think it's probably one of the best shots of the cockpit I've seen. Just shows everything. Because we now had a really good avionics and weapons system, we also got AIM-9L Sidewinders, which are the latest version of the Sidewinder. Meant that we could actually take the Hornets on, and even though we didn't quite have the airframe engine performance that they did, we had the weapon systems to match them. And in many regards, our avionics system was better than theirs.
What's that on the side of the intake?
I was wondering, didn't you know Skyhawks had Canard? Yeah, when the Aussies came with the F-18s in 1988, we thought, right, we're going to fool these boats. So we made these canards up and put this out on the flight line, waiting for them to taxi in after they landed. And they taxi past it, and of course they all went, "Ooh, what's that?" You know. And so the pilots played them on for several days that we come up with this canard for the aircraft and improve the turning performance of the aircraft. And blah, blah. Yeah, we played it along good. At the same time as the avionics upgrade, we also did a wing refurbishment, because the original wings were about 4,000 flying hours, which was when the US Navy said they would start to crack, and that was what was happening. The wing spars were cracking. That's the forward spar there, middle spar and rear spar. Blair's probably done a few repairs on those spars. Yeah, it involved replacing all three spars in was it the lower skin we did, or the upper? Yeah, lower skin. So the original skin on the top was kept, that's where all the access panels are, but the lower skin was all replaced as well.
So is that a Woodburn, is it?
Yep. Oh, that's actually in the US Navy photo, that one. I haven't been able to find a good photo of ours. But it was the same. We went over to the US Navy and because they were doing it, so we learnt how they were doing it. We bought a full set of 24 wing spars off McDonnell Douglas. They still had brand new ones sitting there that had manufactured but never used. So we got the last wing spars in the world. And that program ran in parallel with the avionics upgrade, so effectively re-lifed the aircraft. The US Navy had originally designed the Skyhawk to last for about 3,000 to 4,000 hours. That's all they thought it would last. The wings that was about as long as they last during carrier operations and combat, but the fuselages were good for a lot more than that. And some of the US Navy A4s got up to over 12,000 hours on the airframe. So probably had several new wings in that time. And some of our A4s, well, now they'll be up around 9,000 airframe hours. They were over 8,000 when we sold them.
They were clapped out, weren't they?
They were. No armourers in the room. Gunnies. The Maverick air-to-ground missile was another weapon we introduced to Kahu. Initially just the TV guided version, but later we also got the infrared one, which was designed for anti-shipping. We only got to fire 2 of them during the Kahu test flight trials. After that, they were worth too much money and we weren't allowed to fire anymore.
So with that guy in the back seat, is he guiding it?
Yeah, no, he was filming it with a video
Oh, just
camera.
filming it.
Yeah, that's Rick Bolger, the base commander.
It's a good thing the photographer got it right, eh?
Oh yeah, and those missiles went whoosh real quick. I was on the ground with my zoom lens and the thing just went whoosh, gone. Couldn't see it. And the rocket motor only burns for about 2 seconds, and then after that it's just purely on kinetic energy.
Oh, really?
So you can't see it, even though it was a white missile, you could not see it until it went boom on the container that it was aimed at. Yeah, really, really good missile.
Look at the good photographer.
Yeah. So that we only did one live firing on a Sidewinder AIM-9L. Again, we bought 100 missiles. We're only allowed to ever fire one of them. And I'm sure we gave them away for nothing at the end of the last decade.
Something like John Smith's got.
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah. We might need them. We also introduced the laser-guided bomb GBU-16 with Kahu, even though it wasn't connected to any aircraft systems in terms of its guidance. It could be dropped from a pre-Kahu aircraft as well. It required a laser designator from a ground designator or another aircraft. But yeah, it just gave us another capability which was pretty cutting edge at the time. And during the Gulf War, if you think this is early 1990s when the Gulf War was happening, all these weapons that we were introducing were exactly what was used in the Gulf War. That's just 1,000-pound general purpose Mark 83 bomb. So airburst, so you can set the fusing in them to be either airburst or impact on the ground, but that's the airburst, so you can see you wouldn't want to be standing above ground or even in a trench underneath that. The last Carry Red team was formed in 1990, and then they had a fatal accident and there was no more Carry Red after that. It's got a cool shot taken by my mate Andy Radke, who was a photographer at Hakia. That was the shot, really great shot, but then someone took a shot of him he had to duck. He thought he was going to get smacked. Yeah, by then the aircraft was pulling up. And then just the post-Kahu weapons. Still got the same dumb bombs, guns, rockets, but yeah, now we've got some smart missiles to go with it. Continue with our annual deployments to Southeast Asia, even through the ANZUS break-up. We were still able to exercise with Australia and the Singaporeans, Malaysians, Thai, and of course they started getting F-16s and aircraft that we could only dream of. But with our Kahu avionics and pretty good pilots, they could still certainly hold their own against an F-16. Then the Aussies got their 707 tankers, so we were able to utilise those in Australia, and they came to New Zealand a few times as well for exercises. Just gives the aircraft a whole, gives the A4 a whole different sort of mode of operation, because you don't have to carry fuel, you can just carry your weapons and fuel off the tanker. These bottom shots were taken on a VC-10 and RAF VC-10 tanker up in Malaysia. In 1991, 2 Squadron was packed up and sent to Australia to Nowra, which was where the Australian Navy operated their Skyhawks until they sold them to us. The deal when they sold them to us was that the Australian Air Force was going to take over the role they did, which was fleet support, attacking ships, training the ship's gunnery and radar systems, and the Australians were going to use the F-18s for that. But the Australians pretty quickly realised using a very expensive F-18 for that sort of thing was going to, wear the airplane out really quick, because flying at low level over the sea, you are going to wear it out. And yeah, they just didn't want to do it. It wasn't sexy enough for them, so they just stopped doing it, and it left the Navy with a hole. So they approached New Zealand and said, would you like to send some Skyhawks back here and we'll pay you? So that's what they did. We sent 2 Squadrons to Australia for 10 years. They paid for everything. And I was lucky enough to go on the first push, 91 to 93. We got a rent-free house, fully furnished. They paid the power, gas, phone. It was amazing. And yeah, it was a really good deal for New Zealand. Yeah, in 2 Squadron we deployed all around Australia, exercising with their Navy, because they had 2 fleets, one on the west coast, one on the east coast, so we'd have to go to both and chase their boats around the country, and got pretty good at it.
Is that why one of the Squawks has lost it on the west?
Yeah, they were over there exercising with the Navy. Yeah. It was doing air-to-air combat, but it was part of the Navy exercise. 2 Squadron only ever had 6 aircraft over there, but regularly 75 Squadron would deploy over there to supplement them. And in 1999 we ended up with 15 jets on the flight line at Nowra, and we flew all 15 of them in one sortie, which was quite interesting, just getting them off the ground and getting them all back on at the end. But they did one massive ship strike with 15 jets, which would have been pretty interesting for the Aussie Navy to try and sort out. General shots of time in Nowra. We did a lot of air shows. That's one of the Avalon air shows. It was great PR for the RNZAF. The Aussies also asked us to do, we opened Bathurst a couple of times, Sandown 500, so yeah, we were a squadron for hire. Especially if it involves some free tickets to something like that, and we'd definitely do it.
Is it the speeds?
I was just going to
Yeah.
say, it's space.
Oh, yeah. Boys came up with some pretty cool patches. We're definitely part of the Australian Navy over there, but very much still part of New Zealand. I'm very proud of that. So until Helen Clark came along, anyway. So yeah, 1998, I was on 75 Squadron, and there'd been rumours that we were getting F-16s, and we all scoffed at it and went, yeah, right, never happened. And then it did. Didn't. Yeah, end of 98, the government signed a deal to lease 28 F-16s from the US. They were brand new airplanes, but this was some of the pamphlets and publicity stuff. It was a pretty exciting time to be on 75 Squadron, knowing we were going to be getting these airplanes. But of course it all came to a grinding halt shortly after. Those are the aircraft actually in the desert. They were built originally for the Pakistan Air Force, 28 of them, but Pakistan was playing with nuclear weapons at that time, so they had a big arms embargo put on them. So the aircraft were test flown out of the factory and then put straight into storage in the desert, and that's where they were sitting. And the US wanted to really move them on and get rid of them, so that's why they saw us as a real good way to get rid of these aircraft. The Pakistanis had paid for them, and they weren't going to get the money back, so the Yanks didn't care what they got for them. They were F-16A models, which was the early model, but they'd been modified with all of the sort of modifications of the later versions, including the engine, which was the latest, most powerful F-16 engine. They also had a big elevator on them, which our pilots were really looking forward to flying these in dogfights, because with the light airframe of the F-16A and the big engine and the big elevator, they were going to be able to outturn anything. They were going to be a good dogfighter, but fortunately we never got to do it. So that was the facts of it. 13 single-seaters and 15 two-seaters. So there was a lot of two-seaters in the buy, but that was just because that was what they were, take it or leave it. So the intention was to fly 22 of them, and 6 of the two-seaters would be broken down for spare parts. I think the highest hours any of them had on them was 10 hours. That was a 10-year lease and split into 2 5-year blocks with an avionics weapon system upgrade at the 5-year mark. So there was a lot included in the package that wasn't really made public at the time. The lease cost was just $12.5 million a year for all 28 aircraft. It was unbelievable. It was the deal of the century. And the Australians couldn't believe it, because they'd been buying F-18s and all these airplanes and costing billions and billions of dollars, and the Yanks had never offered them a deal like this. And here was us that had pissed the Yanks off so much, and they offered us this deal, and it was like, wow. There was a one-off cost for spares and training and weapons and support equipment, but that was just about totally going to be offset by the sale of the A4s, because at that stage they were still worth about $200 million, and the Philippines were going to buy them. And again, that was all being facilitated by the Yanks, because they wanted the Philippines to get into a new aeroplane to replace the old F-5As, and they saw our A4s as being a good type, so it was all going to work to everyone's favour. And at the end of it, we had the option of buying the whole fleet for only $140 million US, which was peanuts really. The contract was signed in August 99, and then in November 99 there was the general election. That's what they would have looked like, probably that colour scheme there. We would have just painted New Zealand markings over the top of the Pakistani colour scheme. They were just in that grey colour scheme. We wouldn't have painted them like that. As part of the deal, I said, we were selling the A4, so they produced this glossy brochure and videos, which were quite fun to assist with producing. We flew through the Philippines after one exercise in 2000 to sort of show the aircraft off to the Philippines government, and we played all the head-up display footage from the exercise we just had with the Malaysians, including shooting down MiG-29s, and the Philippines they were just wow, because they were wanting something that had some capability. But yeah, then that happened.
Should be back in a few months.
Yeah. So yeah, by March 2000 it was obvious that it wasn't happening, and then there was probably going to be worse to come. So pretty much from 2000, the pilots started leaving. They could see the writing on the wall, and they were being offered jobs in Australia, flying Hornets and then the RAF. So they just all started leaving. The F-16s themselves, though, because we didn't want them, the US Air Force and Navy just went, well, we're having them, because they could see what they were great aircraft with their dogfighting ability. So they formed a squadron of Navy aggressor aircraft, and they're still using them for that today. I think there's 12 of them being used for that. Some went to the US Test Pilot School, and some Air National Guard units picked up a few as well. But yeah, they certainly didn't muck around and wait for us to come back and say sorry. Eventually Pakistan was allowed to purchase some of the aircraft, and about half of the 28 ended up going to Pakistan, so this was one of them on its delivery flight. So about half of them are in the States still flying, and half are in Pakistan. Meanwhile, back in New Zealand, it was back to business with the A4, and a lot of uncertainty about our future. I'll just quickly go through the accidents and losses of airframes we had. The first one was the engine failure in October 1984. The oil pump on the engine had been assembled incorrectly, and the oil pump had been changed. Nothing was picked up during engine runs on the ground, and the test flight took off. Everything was fine. The pilot was Wing Commander Fred Kinvig, really experienced pilot, and he decided to do some touch and goes at the end of the test flight. If he just landed, he probably would have been alright, but on his first touch and go, as he started climbing out, the engine just stopped, and full gear down and dirty with no airspeed on. There was nothing he could do, so he just banged out. So that was the RNZAF Skyhawk's only kill. Prize bull of bulls. I believe we had to pay a lot of money for that bull. But yeah, that's the cockpit, so he made a good choice to get out of it. That cockpit now has actually been rebuilt and is on, well, it's not on display, but it's here in the museum in the back in the reserve collection hangar, and it's been Kahu, so it's got a head-up display and all that in it. So it is that cockpit. Took a lot of work to rebuild it.
But it wasn't a Kahu jet, was it?
No, this is 1974. The aircraft came down, reasonably intact, and because the engines in this piece, it was fine. They were able to pull it out, send it away, and find out exactly what happened to the oil pump. As you can see the wing there. Yeah, the bearings all seized. Next one lost was 1981. T-Bird just flew into a hillside in the Ruahine Ranges. No one saw it, no one knows what happened, and yeah, could just control flight and terrain, no doubt. John Dick was apparently a really nice guy, young fellow, only 26. Initially, when they found the aircraft wreckage, there was 2 parachutes hanging in the trees, and they thought, oh God, he's ejected. But it was just the impact that initiated the ejection sequence. It was a T-Bird who was flying, but there was only one person in it, but the rear seat always fires first, so that had gone before. The next one was Townsville in 1985, so one of the Australian G aircraft. They didn't have a drag chute in the back, and one of the advantages of the drag chute was landing on a wet runway. It enabled the aircraft to slow down quickly, because you'd be aquaplaning on the tyres, landing on wet runways. And unfortunately, this guy got all sideways and tipped it on its roof. And he managed to climb out of there. He smashed the canopy himself just before the fire crews got there, and crawled out that hole there. But the aircraft was subsequently repaired and is now flying with Draken in the States. It was a big repair though. It needed new wing, new aft fuselage, and a lot of work. Wheels up landing in 1989, 2 Squadron jet, touchdown short of the runway on the grass, ripped the undercarriage off on the right hand side. So he managed to get the gear up and managed to get it enough, just you can see where it is there, it came up to about 45 degrees before it jammed. It was above the level of the drop tanks, so they gave them the okay to land on the drop tanks. And that was the sort of rolled out sequence. You can see a bit of flame from fuel in the drop tanks, but it extinguished itself pretty quick. Had a groundie in the back seat, good mate of mine, Spiel. The arrestor cable snagged around the drop tank and the undercarriage leg here. It didn't actually catch the hook. And later on, when they investigated it in an inquiry, they found out that the US had also landed several Skyhawks on their drop tanks, and a number of them, the arrestor cable had ridden up over the nose and gone through the canopy and decapitated the pilots. So we were very lucky that didn't happen here. the procedure now, or after that, was you don't use the wire, you just land and slide. And there was actually very little damage to the airframe. There was a bit of damage to the nose and a little bit of damage to the wing. The drop tanks were obviously stuffed, but the rest of the aircraft was pretty good. Kiwi Red mid-air, 1989. The manoeuvre they were doing was a roll under brake, so that's what it should like. So each aircraft in turn rolls and pitches away. In Crater's case, when his nickname was Crater, not a very good name for him with what happened, but when he did his roll, he didn't pitch, he just rolled, he just went droop, and then went, whoop, fuck, and turned left and started doing his pitch, but by then this guy had gone whoop, underneath him, and so you'll see in the next slide. So he got out of sequence, so this is Graham Carter here, he should have been way over here somewhere, so he couldn't see this guy here just because of, I guess, the canopy and where the positioning was, and then that was the moment of impact underneath Red 5 there, and this is the damage to Red 5. It smacked into the bottom of the wing and the buddy store, broke the rear spar right through here, and it would have just decapitated him. They found his helmet and pieces of the canopy way back from the crash site. So and the armoured glass of the windscreen was bent like a banana, so yeah, there was no hope of him having survived that. 08 was engine failure, 92. Pilot ejected, but in the sequence of the ejection, the man seat separation here, the life raft pack, dinghy pack, which he was sitting on, separated from the whole thing somehow. Fortunately, he landed on the beach down here, but you can see how close to the sea he was. If he'd landed in the water, he wouldn't have had a dinghy pack, and that's what you want when you're landing in the water. Were you involved in that one, Blair? Yeah. We had to dig it out. There was just a mangled mess, and to try and figure out what happened from that was a massive undertaking. We never really did, but it was fuel interruptions. Yeah, some sort of interruption to the fuel supply to the engine, but what? I don't know. Scott Armour.
Did you rebuild that cockpit?
That was dropped.
Most of it's probably still in the farmer's hole.
Yeah.
You can just, I think, where's the drag chute? You can just make out, I think that's the Vikings current of the drag chute at the back. And I think the nose it sort of folded itself into a big banana, isn't it?
The engine is actually bent into.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Heavy landing at Ahakia, and again, at this period of time we were having a lot of fuel problems on the aircraft, and the pilot got a low fuel warning indication not long after takeoff, and he had to get back to Ahakia because his gauge was saying you've got no fuel. He didn't have time to dump fuel out of the drop tanks and get rid of the rest of the fuel, so he landed way overweight, and that was the result. It just snapped the undercarriage off when he touched down and skidded off onto the grass. So that's Skyhawk 54, which is now in the museum here. It was repaired after that. They had to rebuild the wing and do a few other repairs to the airplane, but again it got repaired. He was very lucky though, because it could have turned really ugly. Another engine failure in 1996, and this one was again another oil problem. There was an oil pipeline on the side of the engine, fractured and broke, so all the oil was lost. He turned around, got all the oil warning indications, headed back to Hakia, but the engine seized and he was having flames coming out the tailpipe, so he ejected. It was only 8 kilometres from Hakia, but didn't quite get there. And again, you can see from the crater it was another mess. There was not much left to go by, but that was the engine. You can see how condensed it is after its interruption. But from that they were able to find what happened in the broken pipeline and subsequently find that we did have a similar problem on a number of engines. And again, this is all age-related stuff that you're learning by use of the airplane, and it's getting old. 11 over in Nowra, during practicing doing air-to-air refuelling demonstration, the plugged barrel roll, which was our party trick at air shows. Muzz Nelson there had never done one before, as had his wingman who was in behind plugged in, but neither of them had ever done the plugged barrel roll routine before. They were practicing for an air show in Melbourne. They had one practice, and this was the practice, and then they got it horribly wrong over Nowra, and Muzz ended up crashing into the ground. just never pulled out. But he knew he was going to go in, and he called over the radio to Eastie, who was in the back jet behind, to pull up. So Eastie pulled up literally in the tops of the trees. I've seen the HUD tape, and he was right in the trees when he pulled out. So very close, but Muzz being just a little bit in front of him, a bit lower, he just couldn't and hit the ground. So yeah, pretty sad time. And the last one was in March, so only a month after Murray Nelson's accident. Another 2 squadron jet, this time over in Perth, and doing air-to-air combat, and just departed controlled flight, doing too much, trying to do too much, and flat spun the aircraft, and had no choice but to eject. But fortunately this time the seat pack all stayed with him, and he was bobbing around in the ocean for a couple of hours, waiting for a rescue helicopter to come and get him.
No advance.
Yeah. Lots of other incidents and accidents over the years. Bird strikes were a common risk to any fast jet at low level. The biggest one we ever had was this one here. It was an Albatross, went down the right-hand intake, and you can see the damage there. Absolutely horrendous. And fortunately, none of those metal bits went down in there. There was some small metal bits went through the engine because it had quite a bit of damage, but it kept going and enabled the pilot to get back to Whenuapai. That one there was a good one while I was on 75. It was a Hawk, again, just punched right through the side of the intake. That aircraft was Ford Skyhawk 14, and the insides of that airplane still stunk of fish for years, because it was an Albatross full of fish, and it stunk of fish for years. The repair for that was to cut the whole intake off and get another one out of the desert, cut one off another US Navy aircraft in the desert and splice it in. Yeah, big repair, had to be done at Woodburn. And yeah, a few other whoopsies over the years. This one here was over in Nara, pilot on his conversion course. As part of that, they have to do an emergency generator check, which is a little ram air turbine that they pop out, and it just acts as an emergency backup power. So there's several yellow handles in the cockpit, and he was instructed, right, identify the handle that says emergency generator. Yep, got it. Are you sure it's the emergency generator handle? Yep. Right, pull it. Of course, he pulled the canopy jettison handle. So, yeah. Unfortunately, when the canopy left the aircraft, part of it struck the tail and did that damage there, which again was a pretty major repair. But it was all done over in Nara by the skin gods of Sifa and Kahu over there. And then they found the canopy eventually. The piece that went through the tail was that piece there. That one there was a high tension power line in 2001. The pilot was very, very lucky there. He flew between 2 wires. The top one clipped the tail, and he somehow skimmed through the middle of the wires. So yeah, 2001 wasn't a good year for A4s. I mean, at that stage we all knew we were in history, and unfortunately our safety performance and record went downhill with it. Yeah, so 8th of May 2001, Helen and Phil Goff announced the end of the RNZAF Air Combat Force. Some of the claims that they'd never been used to support the army, they were clapped out. It was all just total lies. In fact, the day they announced that, 75 Squadron was doing this up at Wairau for the SAS, dropping bombs for them. So yeah, didn't go down very well with us, because we'd apparently never done that. The final deployment to Singapore in September 2001. September 2001 might ring a bell. I left New Zealand on the day the Twin Towers got bombed. That's me, younger me. But yeah, even that didn't change the government's decision, and we stood there in awe in Singapore watching all these US squadrons of F-16s, F-15s, everything flying from the States to Saudi to Afghanistan to start the war against terror. And we just stood in awe and looked at what everyone else was doing, and we thought, guess we're not going. We had lots of media come over for that deployment because it was the last one, so there was lots of interviews about what people thought about what was happening. It was a pretty sad time. That was the last bomb that the Skyhawks dropped, 1,000-pound LGB.
That's a pity, isn't it? That's pretty good.
Yeah, I wished I'd had that for the book. I only got a copy of this last week. The guy that took it said he's been too scared to put it out there on the net. But he put it on Facebook last week, so I said, right, I'm going to use that in the presentation. But yeah, that was the feeling. Yeah. Yeah, sad day, disbandment and farewells. By then I'd already been made redundant, so I came to the parades as a civilian because most of us got kicked out in November, but the last day was 13th of December. The final flypast and the end of an era.
That photograph there of the Skyhawk behind the tower, would that be the final beat up at Hakia?
No, that was the last one for this, but there was still the demonstrator aircraft at Hakia for another 4 years.
I saw that coincidentally.
And a very similar shot to that. I think you'll see it shortly. So yeah, 75 Squadron flying at Hakia. Flight line should be full of Skyhawks. Unfortunately, it's empty, still is. 75 hangar is now empty. There's nothing in it. And the squadron standards are in the chairport of Hakia. So the disposal saga, I've put that in here because it was a bit of a saga in itself. It took over 10 years. Someone came up with that billboard. I think it was Craig Brenkin actually came up with that. Because they were sold many times over those 10 years. I worked for SAFE here at Hakia at this thing called ACFDU, which is Air Combat Force Disposal Unit. SAFE here took over the maintenance of the A4s and Mackies while they were trying to sell them. So I worked for them for nearly a year after I left the Air Force. And that was our hangar, which was the old AMS hangar at Hakia. We had initially 5 A4s and all the Mackies that we were flying. So it was quite a busy time. We had lots of people coming over to look at the A4s, and every time they'd turn up we'd do this. We only had 2 A4 pilots left at that stage. The rest of them had joined the Australian Air Force or the British Air Force. But gradually, yeah, we've gone. Both of those guys were gone as well. So in 2004, yeah, the A4s were stopped flying. Most of the A4s were at Woodburn in storage, and initially they were in indoor storage like this, really well wrapped up, looked after. They'd be engine run every 6 months, so take them out, run all the systems, just keep them ticking over. The final A4 flight, July 2004. Yeah, that's that shot there. Chris Underwood. He was the ex-A4 pilot. He was studying at Canterbury University, and he was the only A4 pilot around that was prepared to come back and just fly the A4 occasionally for demos and that. So yeah, December 2007, they went outside and under latex, and while it looked pretty sharp, the latex, when they first put it on, a week later it looked like that.
A week?
Yep. Don't know what they did wrong, but they must have used water base. Well, that's what it looks like to me. As soon as the water got on it, it just dissolved it, it melted it. And then the water got trapped under it, and then, yeah, it was just a nightmare. And they stayed like that, outside for the next 5 years. And water got into the cockpits, and some of the cockpits were like swimming pools. Some of the ones that have gone to museums, they're in museums because they'll never fly again because of the corrosion damage that was caused by the water getting in. Yeah, really, really disappointing that that's what happened to them after how well they'd been looked after, and got pushed outside, and they couldn't even cut the grass. Yeah, there were some quite good cartoons. And then, in 2011, by then the Labor government had finally been removed from office, and National was in power with ACT as their coalition partner. Heather Roy was the ACT Associate Minister of Defence, and I'd been working with her for quite a few years on what we should be doing with these. And if I'd my way, they should have gone to the training school at Woodburn, and they would have been brilliant there for replacing the Strike Masters and Sues and Devons and other things that were just so obsolete. But for political reasons, they weren't allowed to do that because the Skyhawks had to be disposed of. So when National and ACT got into power, Heather Roy sort of already knew what should happen to them, but I said, well, if you can't give them to the school, give them to museums. And fortunately, that's what happened. We managed to get 9 of them to museums, as well as 8 of the Mackies. And we've got 2 of those aircraft here. Just some shots of some of them going to museums and now on display in them. The Australian Navy had always wanted one of theirs back, and it had actually been written in the contract when we bought them that we had to give them one back when we disposed of them. And again, it was only me going to Heather Orion and says, it's in the contract, you have to do it. And she went, oh, okay, we better go and have a look. Yeah, sure enough it was. So they did a good job though. The RNZAF did the whole thing, converted it back to a TA4G. They did all the mods, took the drag chute off it, changed the fin tip, and made it look like a G again, and then painted it even.
Is it still a Kahu cockpit, or is it?
Yeah, it has. It's just, yeah, it was a bit hard to convert the cockpit. They took everything out of it. But, yeah.
That's one of the weird.
So then Draken International came along, and at the last minute they saved the rest of the aircraft because they were getting chopped up. That was what was going to happen. But their CEO, Jared Isaacman, was on his honeymoon in the States and heard about they were going to get chopped up. So he stopped his honeymoon and flew out to New Zealand and says, I'll buy them. So it was, yeah. So he got, yeah, 8 A4s, 9 Mackies, and all the spares and support equipment simulators for just $8.5 million. A bargain. But then he had to get them all going again. So he had to pay for all the dismantling, shipping and all that. So it was a pretty big job to get them going again. And then 2015 he had all 8 flying again in the States with a lot of help from ex-RNZAF engineers that went over there for 2 or 3 months at a time and helped get them going. Safe Air, Field Air and Army doing all the avionics, Safe Air doing the engines and systems. And then, yeah, they've got a really great facility over there. You'll notice they've kept the RNZAF markings, the Kiwis and the squadron markings on the fin, both sides, even on the wings. That's a little bit unusual, that normally doesn't happen. But that was, they got special permission to do that from the New Zealand government because they were very aware of the history of the aircraft in New Zealand and very proud of that history and wanted to recognise New Zealand's contribution to them. So that's how they are still flying around in the States.
Clapped out.
Clapped out, yeah. Not only did they get the aircraft, they got all of the practice weapons, even the rocket pods, bomb launchers, and they're now certified by the FAA to drop weapons as part of the training they're doing with the US military, which is, again, a first in the States to have a civilian aircraft on the FAA register. I think you might have dropped practice bombs with your ones at AT side. Yeah, but these guys are
live stuff today?
I don't know if they've done any live stuff yet, but they're now.
No, I mean the stuff that we had.
No, they didn't get any of the weapons. They just got the practice ones. Yeah. Just some shots from the guys over there. They've been they're based at Nellis Air Force Base now, so that's where red flag's held, and they're really involved with all that stuff, just as aggressor aircraft flying against anything and everything that comes to Nellis.
Cheap. Hey. Yeah, it's really cheap.
Yeah, they love them. They bought some ex-Israeli A4Ns as well. You can tell they're A4Ns because they've got the extended tailpipe and they've got humps, but they sneakily painted them exactly the same colours as ours. So when they're coming into a dogfight, they all look the same, even though these haven't got a radar and no avionics systems. But at least they merge and they look like they're all the same. So they've got 6 of those as well now. But they're still using the original Kahu avionics. They haven't done anything to it. It's still going, which is pretty amazing for something that's 30 years old now for computer technology. And that's their flight line at Nellis. Yeah, and that's the one they lost the other day, engine failure. There's a couple of other Skyhawks in the RNZAF. There's the one here, the original 07, which was an ex-US Navy A4C/L modified to an A4K, so that's still here in the back of the hangar here. And a Hakia also put together a Skyhawk, which is the secret Skyhawk that no one knows about. And that was because in 2001, 2002, when it was all over, they were all for sale and there was no way there was going to be a Skyhawk kept in New Zealand. And we knew we had enough bits to make one, so we did just that. The front fuselage was from a US Navy TA4 that we purchased that had been crashed off an aircraft carrier that had been in the sea. That was the first aeroplane I ever worked on in the Air Force in 1984 or 5. Our fuselage was purchased from the Blue Angels to repair the 18 when it rolled over and broke its fin. So it didn't have a fin on it, so we had to make a fiberglass fin. Took a mould off an aircraft and made it. The wing was one of the spare wings we had because we had quite a lot of spare wings. And the rest of it was just easy to cobble together, weapons and all the bits and pieces to make it happen. So yeah, that's still at Ahakia. Unfortunately, it hasn't been looked after particularly well. Doesn't look like that anymore. So yeah, any questions?
Which was the one that ended up in 3-store? The pieces ended up in 3-store for a long time.
Was it a Skyhawk?
It wins.
Was it a Skyhawk?
I always thought it was.
Not the Mackie.
It was difficult to tell.
There's a Mackie
it was so
that's
small.
out there. That was the Mackie that we lost when it had an engine failure. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it was a Skyhawk there. So like I said, the Skyhawks are still flying around the world. There's various, Argentina and Brazil still operate them in their militaries. Brazil was flying them off the aircraft carrier still. And numerous civil contractors around the place still flying them. And quite a few privately owned ones that are gradually coming back into...
1954?
Yeah, first flight 1954. So they've done well. And like I said, the A7 Corsair, which was the A4's replacement, they're all gone. None of them flying. So it's a great design.
I just want to add this. This is from a couple of weeks ago at Tauranga at the 75 Squadron reunion. Of the 130 Skyhawk pilots that ever went through the RNZAF, they had 65 of them made it, around 65. So those are all Skyhawk pilots in front of the Skyhawk.
Including 2 US Navy exchange pilots that flew them over here in exchange, so that was pretty cool for them to come. And 1 Draken pilot came from the States as well.
There were 3 Americans.
Sorry, there was 2.
Yeah.
2 US Navy, 1 US.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Don. That's been brilliant.
That was the Wings Over New Zealand show with Dave Homewood.